With students back in school, safety is once again on many parents' minds. In fact, that topic has been a source of great debate since the shooting at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas, left 19 children and 2 teachers dead. While parents, politicians, and law enforcement all weigh in, there's one group that we don't hear from enough: those who are most affected, the students themselves. I-Team reporter Caitlin Canute sat down with 5 local students and recent graduates, ages 12 to 23, from across the metro. They discussed everything from the effects school shootings are having on their mental health to their solutions for lawmakers. Now, we have to note that all 5 are involved in March for Our Lives. It's a movement aimed at ending gun violence. While we recognize their views don't represent those held by all of their peers, their passion and personal experiences are helping shed light on this important topic.
From Newtown
Call is indicating she thinks there's someone shooting in the building.
to Parkland
The fire alarm went off and we went to evacuate.
to Uvalde,
The suspect did act alone.
a world with school shootings is all they've ever known.
How many of you have been doing active shooter drills since elementary school? Raise of hands. All of you.
Well, I was born 3 months before Columbine happened, so my entire life has consisted of school shootings.
According to the Associated Press, starting with Columbine in 1999 up through Uvalde this past May, we've seen 14 mass shootings in schools, and those are just the big ones, with 4 or more people killed, not including the shooter. In those shootings alone, 169 people have died, most of them children.
And it's hard to go to school carefree. Like, it's always somewhere in your head, because if you're going to school, there's always that chance that somebody might come.
We started changing our mindset to it's not a matter of if, it could be a matter of when. So I think having that change in mindset has helped in some ways, because when you're expecting it to happen and it doesn't, then it's a win-win. And if you're expecting it to happen and it does, then at least you're more prepared than being completely blindsided.
It wasn't a matter of if for me, it was a matter of when, and it happened 2 months before I graduated, so I didn't make it.
472 have been shot. Shots fired on Olathe. Officer needs assistance. 472, what is your location? 472 have been shot. It's at the principal's office.
The incident she's referring to involves a shooting at Olathe East High School last March, a shooting that happened in the office next to her.
The first couple of shots sounded like a water bottle had fallen or something heavy, but 7, I knew right away.
Those shots were contained to the office, injuring the school resource officer, a vice principal, and the suspect, fellow student Jalen Elmore. Although they all survived, the incident left an impact on Luciana.
I had to go back to that school every day and have triggers every day and meltdowns leading up to my senior finals, and trying to graduate was hard enough as is. And now that I'm in summer away from the school, I'm so much better. But at the time, I wasn't sure that I honestly wasn't sure I was going to make it. I wasn't sure I was going to graduate.
Still, neither she nor the rest of our panelists support a total ban on firearms. In fact, they say it's just the opposite.
I actually advocate for responsible gun owners, people who lock up their guns in their homes and put the ammunition away from the guns, because 8 children and teens every single day are shot unintentionally by a firearm that's left in their home. So I applaud the responsible gun owners, and I think that we need more of them.
Pushing for responsible gun ownership is something they're all passionate about, and something they say they hope to see in their lifetime.
Gun violence in general has to stop. People are losing friends, siblings, daughters, sons. People are losing sisters and brothers, and even moms and dads, and it has to stop.
Do you think things can get better?
I think, yeah, definitely. I'm really, really excited, because this is conversations being started, not just with us, our generation, but with people that are older than us, people that are ignorant to this to this movement. You know, people kind of just dismiss it because we're young, you know, they don't know what they're talking about, but we know what we're talking about. We've lived through it, and unfortunately, it sucks, it hurts, but we are the ones that are going to those places. We are the ones that are going to go to Congress. We are the ones that are going to become teachers, that are going to become bus drivers. Like, we are the ones that are moving into those places, and I am so excited because we're starting the conversation, and it's not going to stop.
This week, students returned to school in Uvalde, Texas for the first time since a mass shooting there last May. Meanwhile, here at home, we recently saw a 13-year-old bring a handgun to a middle school in the Park Hill district, a stark reminder of why school safety is on parents' and students' minds. That's why the KSHB 41i team recently sat down with 5 local students and recent graduates to discuss everything from how active shooter drills make them feel to their fears of possibly being the next school to make headlines for a school shooting. Now, as a continuation of that conversation, I took their suggestions for safety to lawmakers on both sides of the aisle.
Where's the backbone?
But it wouldn't prevent these shootings.
Inaction by this Congress.
They're coming after your Second Amendment liberties.
The gun lobby.
This ridiculous theater.
In the debate over gun violence solutions, we often see dissonance and finger-pointing.
My name is Luciana.
My name is Genesis.
My name is Nick Clark.
But the students the I-Team talked to wondered why lawmakers don't look for solutions in those common ground areas where both sides aren't so polarized.
Hey, we're all in this together. You know, even us young people, we're all in this together alongside with the adults.
And because this generation is directly invested in looking for solutions,
and I think that there's so much more that we should do.
We took their suggestions to Kansas State Representative Joella Hoy, a Democrat, and Kansas State Representative Tim Johnson, a Republican. All 5 of our students are involved with March for Our Lives, a movement aimed at ending gun violence. However, none of our panelists support taking away firearms from law-abiding citizens and instead believe in responsible gun ownership. Among the solutions the students mentioned, the need for background checks and increased training.
One common sense gun violence prevention legislation that I'd like to see done immediately is background checks. I don't think anyone should be able to go and purchase a gun within the matter of 20 minutes and walk out and just have one.
These young folks are exactly right that you should, if you're going to purchase a firearm, you need to go through a background check.
The background checks clearly is not an issue. I believe anybody that knows weapons, we want those, both law enforcement. We need to know who's getting them.
Yeah, there's absolutely no reason we shouldn't have these, not restrictions, but these laws in place that make it so that getting a gun shouldn't be easier than getting a car. There should be training, there should be safe storage, there should be licenses.
Because gun ownership, even though it's something that's way more dangerous, is viewed as just this inherent thing, it makes people a lot less willing to go through the proper safety training.
I do believe his issue on training is critical. I would strongly encourage, whether it's young hunter safety clinics, if it is general firearm safety, if your family chooses to have weapons, you need that training.
The students also suggested banning assault weapons and increasing the age to buy a gun to 21.
Oftentimes there are 17, 18, 19-year-olds that go into these schools and kill so many people.
But last year in Kansas, we made it so that 18, 19, and 20-year-olds can carry hidden loaded handguns into more public places that they couldn't before. They were able to obtain a concealed carry permit.
I'd also like to see a ban on assault weapons. I don't think people should be able to have a weapon that could kill 17 people in the matter of 5 minutes, like in Parkland.
Is there a use for assault weapons? Is there a reason, or some of these weapons that are maybe referred to as an assault weapon, that perhaps she's not aware of, or a reason why you wouldn't be in favor in banning those weapons?
Do we truly need high-capacity magazines in a civilian setting? Probably not. I mean, those are designed for military issues where you need heavy. Probably for hunting, you don't need. If you're going to have to use a 30-round clip to shoot that deer, you're in trouble.
While neither politician committed to being in favor of an outright ban on these types of weapons, they acknowledge the dangers they can present in the wrong hands. Still, as our panelists shared with us, they don't expect lawmakers to automatically agree to everything they shared. They just want help getting the conversation started.
I'm very impressed by the knowledge and sensibility that these young people have, and it's very disheartening that we are at a place in this country where this has to be such a constant thing on our kids' minds.
Clearly, the educational ability to learn goes up as you feel safe. And if you don't feel safe at school, you're not going to learn. So it has to be a priority, either legislative through funding, which isn't always the answer, but clearly we need to work to provide answers.
You know, those students and the lawmakers also found common ground on another issue, arming teachers. It was something they were all universally opposed to. Our panelists had plenty of other suggestions they passed along. If you're interested, you can read more of that at KSHB.com. By the way, we did try reaching out to lawmakers on the Missouri side, but roughly 40 Republicans we reached out to on both sides of the state line either declined to sit down with us or didn't respond to our request. So thank you to those 2 lawmakers who did sit down with us and let those kids feel seen and heard.
It's not a matter of if, it could be a matter of when.
My entire life has consisted of school shootings.
From witnessing school shootings on TV and even here at home,
We need to lock down.
to a lifetime of active shooter drills, this is their reality.
You start to understand that a bad person, potentially with a weapon, could come into your classroom and start hurting people.
It has to stop. Gun violence in general has to stop.
Earlier this week, I introduced you to a group of students and recent graduates from across the metro, ages 12 to 23. The goal was to give them a chance to feel seen and heard. Tonight, as part of that, I took their concerns to a child psychologist with Children's Mercy. We played portions of that conversation for her so she could offer advice for students and parents alike. So we'll go ahead and get started.
Once you go into older grades, you start to understand that a bad person, potentially with a weapon, could come into your classroom and start hurting people.
We started changing our mindset to it's not a matter of if, it could be a matter of when. So I think having that change in mindset has helped in some ways, because when you're expecting it to happen and it doesn't, then it's a win-win. And if you're expecting it to happen and it does, then at least you're more prepared than being completely blindsided.
So anything about that really strikes you?
It's pretty consistent with what I'm hearing from patients, that these drills really bring about the reality of gun violence in schools for kids, and they occur pretty frequently in schools. And so every time they occur, it brings that reality to kind of the forefront of their thinking. It's disheartening to hear students say things like it's not if, but when.
How do you respond as a parent, or what advice would you have for kids themselves who might be watching this if these drills are causing anxiety?
I think we all start with the basic foundation of providing reassurance of safety. Schools can provide reassurance of safety, providers, parents, that kids are safe, and here are the things that we are doing to keep you safe. We're doing these drills to keep you safe so that you understand what to do in a moment of panic if this situation were ever to come up, and that's the point of the drills.
These are some of the things the students shared with us in terms of things that have either worried them, scared them, based on what they've seen, the drills they've done.
And when I was growing up, I had a fear of going to the bathroom by myself because I always was scared if there was a person who came in with a gun that I would be stuck in the bathroom and I'd have to lock the stall door and stand on top of the toilet while somebody was going through our school with a gun.
I just wanted to add that I would really like to have children someday, but the top thing that comes to mind for me is dropping my child off to school. That is absolutely terrifying and something I think about all the time, and I'll think about in the future when I decide to have children as well.
You know, we talked about it's not just in schools. How many of you, show of hands, have ever felt unsafe, or maybe you find yourself looking at exits, whether it's at a parade, whether it's at a concert, whether it's at the grocery store, at church, at school? Show of hands, how many of you no longer feel safe in these large public gatherings? I mean, how do you approach fears like these? Are these reasonable or are these unreasonable fears?
I think it's important that we don't minimize fears, we validate them, and really remember, I think we want to solve. We want to take away pain, we want to make things better, but sometimes kids just want us to listen. Our job is really to be the vessel for their fears and their worries and just hold it while they work through it, not necessarily to fix it for them.
Yeah, Dia, that last point was the one I think that really struck me the most because, you know, as moms, we want to fix everything.
Yeah.
And you think that especially in our industry, we should be able to find the answers. And she said, it's okay. You don't have to have the answers. Just to be able to say, hey, I hear you. I'm listening and I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe. That's enough.
Really hard hearing the kids talk about how they're coming to some of these conclusions and how they're trying to reason with and reckon with the world that they're forced to grow up in.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. This was such a great group, and I really appreciate their vulnerability and their honesty with us. You know, this did get me thinking, though, maybe there are some resources that could help us parents to start these conversations. Yeah. Today, I reached out to the Johnson County Library just to ask them for some suggestions. Here are some they shared with me. First, On the News. This is a book that helps kids understand the tragedies they see on TV, not just school shootings, but natural disasters, all kinds of things. Also, What to Do When the News Scares You. That's a book about helping kids process, again, scary events and stories. And then this one is specifically for us parents. When the World Feels Like a Scary Place. That's a book that can help address our kids' anxiety. And I was actually discussing this in the newsroom with one of our producers, and she came across this just today, matter of fact. It's a new book just released. She saw this posted on social media. It's about a girl who feels anxious after an active shooter drill at school. Again, our experts said books like these can be a great way to start those conversations at home, just to get you talking. Meanwhile, coming up this Friday, we're going to focus on the changes our panelists say would make them feel safer in school.
Well, if you have a school-aged child, chances are they've experienced an active shooter drill at their school.
Unfortunate reality, right? Well, the
Right.
KSHB 41i team sat down with a panel of students and recent graduates earlier this fall. They shared with us how those drills made them feel, and they commented on what they felt was missing.
So we took their comments and concerns to the co-owner of Strategos. It's a company that trains teachers and school staff on how to respond in the event of an active shooter. And so what we learned is that it's possible that some parts of the lessons aren't being passed on to the students.
As Caitlin Canute explains in this final installment of her series, there may be more that teachers and families can do.
In any shooting, as soon as the first shot is fired, the clock starts ticking.
I have studied these things for so many years that it becomes a part of you. And I see people dying for lack of knowledge.
As the co-founder of Strategos, Mark Warren says that's why it's so important to have a plan in place. He explains when you first hear those shots, you become startled or fearful, then normalcy bias sets in. That's where you try to rationalize what you heard.
The problem is that takes 7 to 13 seconds to resolve that cognizant, that dissonance going on in my brain. 7 to 13 seconds of time wasted in my response.
Next, it's disbelief. And without a plan, he says that's when despair and hopelessness can set in. But he says training can combat some of that. However, students we spoke to explained they're worried those same lessons are being passed on to potential school shooters.
And while the active shooter drills are supposed to be helpful, a lot of times we see that the shooters are people who have gone to those schools, who've been through those same drills. So they know the procedures, they know where people are hiding.
So Mark, what would you say to these students?
They do have inside knowledge. However, that's what training overcomes. When someone responds from a trained response, it negates their plan.
These teenagers coming out of Columbine High School running across the lawn.
Warren points to Columbine as an example. Although 13 people were killed, he says the death toll could have been much higher, considering the two shooters were in the school for 49 minutes. He says taking small steps, such as barricading doors, prevented more lives from being lost that day.
That created the separation that people needed because they needed time.
But what if students are not in a classroom when a shooter opens fire?
But it doesn't account for lunch period, it doesn't account for recess, it doesn't account for if you're not in the classroom, if you're in the office, or if you're in the bathroom.
So any advice for those students?
We teach a nonlinear model called 3 outs.
Warren explains those 3 choices in any active shooting situation are lockout, meaning lock the door and barricade it with whatever you can, get out, running away from the threat, and take out, fighting back, but he says that should be used as a last resort.
Well, it sounds to me like you are teaching this to the teachers, to the schools. maybe they're just not sharing that with the students. Is that something you would advise, that maybe they walk through that in the future if they're not already doing it?
Right, I completely agree. Again, though, sometimes they're worried about, are we teaching the next shooter? And so there's a lot of times where they hold it close to the vest, and I think we need to be pushing some of this training more down to the student.
But is more better? Studies have shown mixed results, with some indicating these lessons can cause children more anxiety, something we heard from our group of students.
As you go into like high school and you start to fully understand the gravity of what that drill means and who they're referring to, it makes you feel less safe.
The reality is we still have to plan for it, prepare for it. You're more likely to be struck by lightning than die in an active shooter. You know, this is very, very low probability. So it's not the frequency of the event that we're preparing for, it's the impact that it's going to have if it happens.
And that's what he says this training is all about, minimizing damages and buying precious seconds to protect yourself till help can arrive.